It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Good morning to you. It is Christmas Eve morning, and by the way, Gary and Eric, they will return after the new year. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 89.7 WTN. Follow me on the socials if you would, Facebook and also X at Dan Mandis Show. There's a lot going on this morning, a lot of news for this time of the year, and a lot of people are horrified. You know, right as the show was ending last night, we got word that Joe Biden was commuting the sentences of these 37 federal death row inmates, and they are now sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And, you know, I started thinking, this is like the most Biden-like thing ever. This is the most Democrat thing ever. These people now will be spending the rest of their lives in prison on our dime. And so the media has been going on in reporting who some of these people are that will now be able to live, again, life in prison on our dime. People like Jose Olivia Torres, who killed, listen to this, it's horrible, a little girl and a woman. He stabbed one of these little girls, strangled a 20-year-old woman as well. Horrible, reprehensible human being. These are people that kill little boys, kill little girls, kill innocent victims. Brandon Council out of South Carolina, he is a cop killer. Killed a couple of bank tellers at point-blank range. Daryl Lawrence is the guy who is a cop killer as well. And so the more that we hear about how reprehensible these people are, the more you and I, we're repulsed at what Joe Biden and the Democrats did. And I know what you're thinking. I'm right there with you. Biden didn't do this. Whoever's pulling the strings did this. Well, okay. I agree with you. Probably wasn't Joe Biden. Whoever is pulling the strings of the presidency is the one that did this, whether it's the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, the Joe Biden's inner circle. All of these folks are the ones that did this. And if you really think about it, that makes it even worse than if it was just Joe Biden, because this tells you that there more than likely is, you know, this group of people within the Democrat Party that are pulling the strings that all thought that it would be a good idea to commute the sentences of cop killers and child killers as well. Thomas Stephen Sanders is another one that Joe Biden has saved the life of. He killed a 12-year-old girl, shot her in cold blood. This is Eric Schmidt. He is a senator from the state of Missouri.
I think it's important to talk about the victims here. Lexis Roberts went on a camping trip with her mother and Thomas Sanders. Thomas Sanders, on the way back, took her mother out and executed her in cold blood in front of Lexis, then slit Lexis Roberts' throat and let her die in the woods. This is someone that Joe Biden, on the eve of Christmas, decided to commute his sentence. This is nuts. This is totally nuts. And so the outrage is real. It's justified. And again, Joe Biden on his way out is, again, cementing his status as one of our worst presidents.
Can you imagine? I mean, he brings up a great point, this Eric Schmidt. Right before Christmas, and the Democrats do this. And so if you're a parent or your loved one of one of these victims that one of these dirtbags killed, and they get to live out the rest of their lives in prison as opposed to facing death, it's an awful, awful decision, because now you feel like there is no justice. And of course, as you can imagine, although I have not seen, and maybe it's out there, but I have not seen where Donald Trump has taken an official position on this. But I think it's safe to say that he is horrified, like I believe most Americans would be. Now, here's part of what I was curious about. There is a Justice Department policy where if the victim's family wants to address a possible clemency, the family can request to make an oral presentation. Now, I don't know if the families were consulted, but again, child killers, child rapists, cop killers, guys that have killed innocent women. And clearly, Joe Biden and the Democrats, they simply don't care about the families of these victims. You know who does? Donald Trump. There was a moment during America Fest last weekend where Patty Marin, the mother of Rachel Marin, who was murdered by an illegal alien, she spoke about Donald Trump and how he, Trump, the incoming president, truly cares about the families of victims.
And when you spoke to him, you could see in his eyes that he genuinely cared about his fellow human being. But the thing I appreciate the most is that he heard the cries of a mother, and he cared. And he made a promise that he was going to protect us and that he was going to help us. And that's all you can ask from your president, but also just from a fellow human being. And so I personally, I am so honored to know this man and to think of you as a friend.
And they had a nice moment there on stage. But the point is that you have just such a difference between Joe Biden and the Democrats and Donald Trump and the Republicans. Donald Trump cares about the victims. Republicans care about the victims. Republicans care about law and order. The Democrats and Joe Biden? Is it just me, or does it seem like they care more about the criminals than the victims? The Democrats and Joe Biden, they care more about the people that actually broke the law than the victims' families and their victims. Now, remember, part of what's going on here is Joe Biden, he's Catholic, right? And he and the Pope spoke by phone, I guess it was last week, and Pope Francis has been pressuring Biden to commute these sentences, and he and the Democrats did it. This is from the Associated Press. These commutations are a significant step in advancing the cause of human dignity and respect for human life from womb to tomb in our nation, says Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, in a written statement heralding the decision. I would like to ask, with all due respect, because I'm not bashing Catholics, I'm not bashing Catholicism, I'm not. But I would ask Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio, how exactly is it that commuting the sentences of these 37 killers, rapists and killers of children, how is it commuting their sentences show a respect for human life? I mean, I'll wait, but there's going to be a lot of dead air, and I've got like 4 hours and 45 minutes left to fill. But I think it's a fair question to ask. How does commuting the sentences of cop killers and child killers, how does that show respect for human life? I don't believe that it does. Now, I'm absolutely positive that there are people within Catholicism and Christians too, and I'm a Christian, but I can tell you that there is another side to this. I'm sure that there's people out there that could tell me the Bible chapter and verse where it says that people should not be put to death. There's other people that I'll probably look them up during the break. There's other people that will say, well, the Bible says this. Other people say, well, the Bible says that. Fine. But I'm just talking about what's right and wrong. And it is absolutely wrong to commute the sentences of child killers, child rapists, cop killers, and so forth. And so no offense to the Catholic Church, but part of that quote also bothers me. And again, I'll read it to you again. Respect for human life from womb to tomb in our nation. You know, people always try and tie these two. Oh, how can you be pro-life and pro-death penalty at the same time? They're contradictory. Well, being pro-life is about protecting the innocent. The death penalty is about killing the guilty, killing those who have killed with the ultimate punishment. It's the ultimate accountability, right? But this is just part of Joe Biden's plan, where he and the Democrats are trying to, as a lot of these folks have said, Trump-proof America. Remember that senator that I played you the audio a few minutes ago, Eric Schmidt, this senator from Missouri. He talks about this overarching plan. It seems to be multifaceted, where the Democrats are trying to Trump-proof America, whether it is illegal immigration, whether it's the commuting of these sentences.
I can only imagine the grief and the shock that these families are experiencing as they get ready for the holidays, remembering the loved ones that were lost and now having to deal with this sort of insult to injury. And I think Joe Biden, in his effort to Trump-proof, we saw some of that, for the next administration, whether it's hiding DEI workers or things at the border. This is just beyond the pale. And I think he's cementing his status as one of the worst presidents in American history.
Oh, absolutely. By the way, the NAACP is all in on this, of course, not shocking at all. Now, there were three that Biden and the Democrats did not commute. Robert Bowers, convicted for the mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. Dylan Roof, convicted of the shooting at the Mother Emanuel AME Church. And Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, convicted for the Boston Marathon bombing. And there's some people on the left that are angry that he didn't commute these guys. So I don't know what the Democrats are thinking. I mean, truly. Because this is, I understand that there's some people that are not shocked by this. On the one hand, I don't know if I'm shocked or not. And I know that sounds sort of wishy-washy. But knowing what I know about Joe Biden, knowing what I know about the Democrat Party, knowing what I know about the last 4 years, where the Democrats have denied that crime is going up, and they have taken the sides of gangbangers and killers and people coming across our southern border. They have taken the side of criminals since literally day one of the administration. So really, I guess that this shouldn't surprise me in the least. But when you find out who these people are and what they did and how Joe Biden has spared their lives, and listen, trust me when I say I do understand that they're not exactly living a life of luxury in prison. I do understand that. But at the same time, he did spare their lives, which is something that these murderers didn't do to the children that they murdered, the cops that they murdered, the women that they murdered, and of course the men that they murdered as well. Bottom line is, whether they were bank tellers, little children, men, women, human beings, they were all innocent. And they didn't get the opportunity to live out their lives like these killers are. So whether it's Jose Olivia Torres or Brandon Council or Daryl Lawrence or Thomas Stephen Sanders, those are but four. And for each of these names that the media is talking about, there are victims and victims' families. And yesterday they woke up finding out that the killers of their loved ones will have their lives spared, which is not what their loved ones got to experience. They're gone. But these folks get to live, thanks to Joe Biden and the Democrats. And America's horrified. Part of the news, and I'll delve into a little bit more deeper into the story here coming up, but part of the news cycle today is that you have a Democrat Party that is absolutely rudderless. They have no voice. They have no real policy. They don't have any leaders. And a day before Christmas, what's the Democrat Party known for? Commuting the sentences of child killers and cop killers. Congratulations, Democrats. You own this one. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
This report is brought to you by Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Electrical systems are one of the most common causes of winter breakdowns. So when your batteries talk, it's important you listen. Keep an eye out for the warning signs that may indicate your electrical system needs attention to help avoid getting stuck out in the cold this winter. The most obvious sign that a battery-related issue is present is if your truck has trouble cranking at the proper speed. If you experience any sluggishness when starting your engine, get a full electrical system check from a trusted service provider.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here, and it is interesting because as we were talking about these commuting of the sentences of these 37 federal death row inmates, they are now sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. And what's interesting, so many talking points with this. But number one is that the Democrats and whoever's running the Biden administration, it's like they don't realize how bad this looks. Because when you go through what some of these guys did, I mean, they are just horrifying. And again, I do realize that there are religious overtones to this because of this conversation that Joe Biden had with the Pope. And, maybe this really was his idea. I really don't know. But we saw this coming because remember that he commuted the sentences of 1,500 people a couple of weeks ago, including one guy who was involved in that private prison scandal from way back when. Remember that story? This one case in particular sent the entire state of Pennsylvania really into an uproar.
It's a big smack in the face for us once again.
The words of Kids for Cash victim Amanda Laura after hearing that President Biden commuted the sentence of disgraced Luzerne County Judge Michael Conahan.
We had no time to get any time taken away from us. We had nobody to write to talk to. But now we're talking about the President of the United States to do this. What about all of us?
Yeah, remember that right now it seems like Joe Biden and the Democrats, they are pro-criminal and anti-victims and their families. Now, years ago, maybe you remember the case. I think I talked about this at the time here on Red Eye Radio. The notorious case of the Kids for Cash scandal rocking Pennsylvania and America. Two judges, Michael Conahan and Mark Civarella, were busted for sending kids to a for-profit prison as they were getting kickbacks to the tune of over $2 million. What did I say about Democrats? Pro-criminal. Yep.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio indeed. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. Always appreciate the opportunity to fill in on Red Eye. You can follow me on Facebook and also X, both at Dan Mandis Show. Matt Gaetz, the House Ethics Report on him has been released. Now, this has been a long time coming. Just to set the scene, you know how much Matt Gaetz is hated by Washington, D.C., right? I mean, former Florida congressman, and he has been attacking, fellow Republicans. The Democrats hate him. A lot of Republicans hate him as well. He was one of the leading forces behind the ouster of Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of people that simply cannot stand Matt Gaetz. He is also one of those that really went after the DOJ and all of their corruption. And so after much ado, the House Ethics Report on him was released. And if you don't know what all of this is about, I'm going to get into it. But basically, there was a lot of very scurrilous accusations against him stemming from what can very descriptively be described as a very party kind of lifestyle several years ago. Yes, he liked women. It would appear that he liked drinking and these other kinds of things. And so there's a lot of accusations being made against him that, he was doing some nefarious things. And so this House Ethics Report comes out, and they looked at text messages, they spoke to people, they did all kinds of investigation into his bank accounts, and this is what they came up with.
A blistering report by the House Ethics Committee with salacious details. It accuses the former Republican Florida representative of statutory rape, paying for sex twice with a 17-year-old girl, and paying other women for sex and drugs on at least 20 occasions. The report also declared that Gaetz lied to the State Department about trying to get an expedited passport for one of the women with whom he had sex. His staffers told the State Department she was a constituent. She was not.
Citing text messages, according to the Associated Press, travel receipts, online payments, and testimony the bipartisan committee paints. And by the way, just so we're clear, and I don't know whether Matt Gaetz did any of this or not, and quite frankly, neither do you, but here's my thing. Bipartisan committees, I have no interest, by and large, as to what they say. Because a lot of folks in D.C. will say, well, it was bipartisan. Well, that doesn't matter. Because, as we all know, the investigations into Donald Trump were also, and I'm air quoting here, bipartisan. That doesn't mean that members of both parties can come after a person if they hate that person enough. Someone like a Matt Gaetz or a Donald Trump. I'm just saying. They say the bipartisan committee paints a picture of a lifestyle in which Matt Gaetz and others connected with younger women for drug-fueled parties, events, or trips with the expectation the women would be paid for their participation. You see, here's the thing with this report is it seems to dance around any real specific crimes committed. And it should be noted, and I'm going to get into this here in a little bit, but it should be noted that the DOJ looked at all of this and they passed. They said, no, there's nothing here. They actually said, one of the things that they said was that the accusers, the witnesses against Matt Gaetz, had absolutely no credibility. And the same witnesses that the DOJ said had no credibility are the same ones that this bipartisan committee utilized to create this report. So you could say, and I don't know, but it sounds to me, Donald Trump always talks about how these were witch hunts against him. And there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that are describing this House Ethics Report against Matt Gaetz as the same kind of a thing. And so they looked at all of these transactions where the accusation is that Matt Gaetz gave all of these women money for sex. Well, these were all payments, but they were logged as, for car repair, food, those kinds of things. And so I'm just going to tell you my impression is that he was living large as a guy who was making good chunk of money, and he's helping out girlfriends or ex-girlfriends or just hookups. But nowhere do any of these things show or prove that Matt Gaetz was actually paying for sex. Matt Gaetz posted this: giving funds to someone you're dating that they didn't ask for and that isn't charged for sex is now prostitution, he says. Gaetz asks in one post on Monday. He says, there is a reason they did this to me in a Christmas Eve report and not in a courtroom of any kind where I could present evidence and challenge witnesses. In other words, basically he's saying that, number one, this wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. That's number one. And number two, and I agree with him on this, they dumped this a couple of days before Christmas. They know that this report is a bunch of BS. Otherwise, they would have released it after the first of the year. They would have released it earlier in the month. But instead, they released it right before the holidays. It's called news management. And they spent a lot of time investigating Matt Gaetz. This is from the Associated Press. The committee found that between 2017 and 2020, Matt Gaetz paid tens of thousands of dollars to women. And this is a quote, and this is important. They say that Gaetz paid tens of thousands of dollars to women, likely in connection with sexual activity and or drug use. Are you kidding me? They use the term likely in connection. If you're using the word likely, then you don't know for sure. If you're destroying someone's character, if you're destroying someone's political career, it better be confirmed and not just likely. I saw that word likely and I thought, okay, so the more that I read this report, the more that I look into this, the more it's like they're dancing around the edges. They say likely in connection with sexual activity and or drug use. They say he paid the women using online services like PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App, and with cash or check. The committee said, here's another question I would have. Matt Gaetz is a smart guy. If he's paying these women for sex, is he really doing it through PayPal? Is he really doing it through Venmo? Or Cash App? No, he's bringing cash. Come on. The committee said it found evidence that Gaetz understood the transactional nature of his relationships with the women. The report points to one text exchange in which Gaetz balked at a woman's request that he send her money, claiming she only gave him a drive-by, and that is in quotes. But I don't believe that proves anything. Women interviewed by the committee said there was a general expectation of sex, the report said. One woman who received more than $5,000 from Matt Gaetz between 2018 and 2019 said that 99% of the time that when she hung out with Gaetz, there was sex involved. So here's my take on this. I think, again, Matt Gaetz was rolling high. He had a lot of girlfriends, and he was very generous. But nowhere does it say that the woman said, if I do this, you have to give me this. Nowhere was there an actual transaction on record as saying that this was for that. Nowhere. One of the things that they point out, Matt Gaetz was in a long-term relationship with one of the women that he paid. So they even acknowledge some of the payments may have been of a legitimate nature, the committee said. I mean, listen, let's all be honest. I can say this as a guy. that oftentimes guys do stupid things when they are in pursuit. In pursuit. Guys are thinking with the wrong body part. I'm sorry. He even says, Matt Gaetz even says, I was generous with girlfriends and ex-girlfriends. They say text messages obtained by the committee also show that Matt Gaetz would ask the women to bring drugs to their rendezvous, the report said. Well, if all this is true, I don't understand why there were no charges brought. They say while most of his encounters with the women were in Florida, the committee said Gaetz also traveled on several occasions with women whom he paid for sex. The report includes text message exchanges in which Gaetz appears to be inviting various women to events, getaways, or parties, and arranging airplane travel and lodging. Again, somebody show me where that's illegal. It's not. Gaetz was being generous with girlfriends. He was hooking up, and he's being generous. I mean, you know, it's almost like you go into a bar and you buy a woman a lot of drinks with the hope of taking her home. I mean, that's what Matt Gaetz was doing. I mean, to me, it seems to be sort of the same thing. I can't speak to the drugs involved. It doesn't seem like the DOJ thought that it was something that was provable to be a crime. There's one woman who said that she and Gaetz had sex when she was 17 years old. She was also on ecstasy at the time, but she swears that it happened. Now, they say that there's no evidence that Matt Gaetz knew that she was a minor when he had sex with her. The committee said the woman told the committee she did not tell Gaetz that she was under 18 at the time, and he didn't ask how old she was. Rather, the committee said Matt Gaetz learned that she was a minor more than a month after the hookup. But she stayed in touch with her. He stayed in touch with her after that and met up with her for what is called commercial sex. And I don't know exactly what that means. But they say commercial sex again, less than 6 months after she turned 18, according to the committee. But one question does remain. If all of this happened, why in the world didn't the Joe Biden DOJ, with Merrick Garland at the helm, why did they choose not to press any charges? Well, again, it's because some of these witnesses had zero credibility. And so part of this conversation has to be, because remember what I reminded you earlier, that Matt Gaetz, he is notorious for going after the DOJ. He is notorious for going after corruption in Washington, D.C. So is it possible that his enemies are going after him with this ethics report? Maybe. But the DOJ had plenty of reason to go after Matt Gaetz, and they chose not to because the witnesses, two of them actually, had zero credibility. This is Molly Hemingway at The Federalist, and here's what she writes. The report comes years after the DOJ dropped its investigation into the same claims on the grounds that the two central witnesses had serious credibility issues. Yet these are the same two central witnesses the House Ethics Committee has relied on for its critical report of Matt Gaetz. So Matt Gaetz and his political enemies thought that these folks had credibility when the DOJ didn't. Interesting. So it does, at least to me, sound like this may have been a witch hunt. We'll talk about this and a whole lot more straight ahead. Dan Mandis here on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Going over the House Ethics report against Matt Gaetz, a report that he did try to prevent from getting out. But one of the things, and I'll be able to get into more of this in the next hour, but one of the things that a lot of people are saying, including Molly Hemingway at the Federalist, is that the guy who was one of the main witnesses against Matt Gaetz had no credibility because, number one, he's in jail, and number two, he threatened Matt Gaetz and said, if you don't help me stay out of jail, I'm going to make some nasty accusations against you.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
The phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here indeed. In for Gary and Eric, they do return after the first of the year. Lots of news to continue to tell you about this morning. By the way, follow me on the socials, if you would, X and also Facebook, at Dan Mandis Show. So there's a lot of coverage of this House Ethics report on Matt Gaetz, and there's a lot of scurrilous accusations that he did a lot of bad things, like having sex with an underage girl, prostitution, these kinds of things. But I'm here to tell you that they didn't prove in this House Ethics report, they didn't prove anything. And one of the accusations is that he was paying for sex. But here's the deal is that, and I was explaining this in the previous hour, but let me retrace here just very briefly, is that if you're a young guy and you've got a lot of money and you're an important person and you're living large, and so you are, and, you know, forgive me for using such a cliche here, but you're making it rain. You're surrounded by hot-looking women, and you're paying for trips, you're paying for drinks, you're generous with your money if they need their car repaired or they need help with rent or whatever it is. Well, you're there to help. Why? Because you're getting a lot of attention from these women. Because that's how guys think. I know because I am one. But it doesn't mean you're paying for sex. It just means that you're being generous with the people around you. That's all it means. And nowhere does this report actually prove that Matt Gaetz paid any money specifically for a sex act. And so the more that I read into this report, the more it just seems like, you know, he was thinking with the wrong body part. I'm just telling you, that's what he was doing. One of the more scurrilous accusations is that he had sex with an underage girl at the age of 17. She was on ecstasy at the time. They say there's no evidence that Gaetz was a minor when he had sex with her, the committee said. The woman told the committee she did not tell Matt Gaetz that she was under 18 at the time. He didn't ask. The committee did say that Gaetz learned that she was a minor more than a month after the party, but he stayed in touch with her after that, met up with her for what they call, and I'm air quoting this, commercial sex, less than 6 months after she turned 18, according to the bipartisan committee. But one of the most important parts of all of this story is that the DOJ, Merrick Garland's DOJ, they hate Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz hates them. He is one of their biggest critics, and he is one of their biggest challengers. They decided not to press charges against Matt Gaetz. This is from Molly Hemingway at the Federalist, because one of the things that she is reporting is that these witnesses had zero credibility. They say the report comes 2 years after the DOJ, I should say, comes years after the DOJ dropped its investigation into these same claims on the grounds that the two central witnesses had serious credibility issues. Yet these are the same two central witnesses the House Ethics Committee has relied on for its critical report of Matt Gaetz. In other words, the DOJ said these people have zero credibility. We're not going to use their testimony. And because we're not going to use their testimony, because they don't have any credibility, then we're not going to bring any charges. And the House Ethics Committee said, hold my beer. We'll go ahead and we'll go after Matt Gaetz using these two central witnesses that the DOJ said had no credibility. They say the two, this is, again, what they're saying. Molly Hemingway. The two witnesses have massive credibility problems. The claims arose from Joel Greenberg, one of the most corrupt Florida politicians of all time, according to Florida reporter Mark Caputo, who is now with the anti-Trump media outlet The Bulwark. Among many other things, they say the former Seminole County tax collector admitted to as part of a wide-ranging case for which he is currently serving 11 years in prison. You know why he's in prison? Because he was falsely accusing a local political opponent, Brian Butte, of having sex with a minor, similar to the outlandish claim he made against Matt Gaetz. So again, remember, this guy, Joel Greenberg, he's where all of these claims came from. Greenberg also reportedly later attempted to frame his own attorney with pornographic images of children. Yeah, I'm going to repeat that. Greenberg, the guy bringing these allegations against Matt Gaetz, also reportedly later attempted to frame his own attorney with pornographic images of children. One New York Times write-up of Greenberg was headlined, like the Tiger King got elected tax collector. According to the Washington Post, again, the guy that was going after Matt Gaetz, that made these accusations against Matt Gaetz, according to Molly Hemingway, Greenberg admitted to fabricating allegations against a school teacher who was running against him to be tax collector. Greenberg had sent letters to the school falsely claiming the teacher had an inappropriate sexual relationship with a student, a similar allegation to the Gaetz case. U.S. District Judge Gregory Presnell, appointed by President Bill Clinton, said Greenberg's actions against that innocent victim were downright evil. So, I mean, you see the pattern, right? This guy Greenberg, who is making these allegations against Matt Gaetz that led to the DOJ investigation, that led to the House Ethics Committee investigation, leading to the report, this guy has a pattern of falsely accusing people of doing heinous things. He's now in prison. Hemingway goes on to write that this guy Greenberg, Joel Greenberg, asked Matt Gaetz to help him get a pardon. Gaetz refused. So Greenberg went after him with all of these allegations. So Mariel Hemingway is reporting on all of this. Most of the other media is not. I mean, if you listen to a lot of these various media outlets, they'll have a 2-minute piece on, all of these different allegations, and then maybe at the end, they'll say Matt Gaetz denies the allegations. But they don't go into all of the details as to how these allegations stem from a guy, Joel Greenberg, who has a history of falsely accusing people of horrific things. So Molly Hemingway had this to say about the guy accusing Matt Gaetz and all of these allegations.
They have prosecuted political opponents. They ran the Russia collusion hoax. And too many people in Washington, D.C. did not stand up against what was happening there. And many Americans are upset about it. Matt Gaetz is one of the most effective people at fighting that Russia collusion hoax and other information operations, whether it was the Brett Kavanaugh information operation, the Donald Trump Russia collusion hoax information operation, or the one that is referenced here, which is something that the FBI and Department of Justice, which hate Matt Gaetz, looked into and cleared him of any wrongdoing. The issue is corruption. It's the Department of Justice's corruption, and people are sick and tired of people in Washington, D.C. doing nothing as these people tried to destroy the country and getting upset at someone who actually might root out the corruption there. We don't have a Department of Justice. We have a Department of Injustice.
That's Molly Hemingway on Fox News, and she's right. Remember, again, and I did explain this earlier, that Matt Gaetz has a multitude of haters on both sides of the aisle. And yes, again, at the DOJ. He went after them constantly. So now it seems to me that this report, released just a day or so before Christmas, the timing of this report seems to me like a signal that they know that this report is meaningless and has no teeth. You know what it's like? It's like a smear campaign that is being paid for by our taxpayer dollars. Now, remember what Nancy Pelosi said about a wrap-up smear.
Called the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
Yeah, it is a tactic. And we see it all the time. I mean, we saw it with Judge Kavanaugh. Of course, didn't work. Justice Kavanaugh, didn't work. Worked with Matt Gaetz. They got him out, didn't they? So now they've destroyed his career because remember that when Donald Trump said that he wanted Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general, then all hell broke loose in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, along comes Pam Bondi, who I think is an outstanding pick. But because Gaetz, he left his position in Congress. So they have destroyed his career. So now the big question is, what is next for Matt Gaetz? Here's what he told America Fest.
Many have asked which perch I will be fighting from next. And some of you throughout this conference have even given me a few suggestions. My fellow Floridians have asked me to eye the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. Maybe special counsel to go after the insider trading for my former colleagues in Congress. It seems I may not have had enough support in the United States Senate. Maybe I'll just run for Marco Rubio's vacant seat in the United States Senate and join some of those folks.
Yeah. Now, ultimately, he did go on to say that he'll be joining One America News, a cable outlet. And, when I saw that, I thought, he might want to, in his new role, begin investigating what is really going on in Congress. Remember what Thomas Massie said. Millions of dollars being paid out, dealing, again, in Congress, with accusations of sexual assault.
Congress has paid over $17 million in hush money for sexual misconduct inside of the offices in these buildings.
So are any of those folks the ones that are investigating Matt Gaetz? Maybe that's what they need to really look into. Because this whole thing with Matt Gaetz, I mean, it seems to me anyway, that it turned out to be nothing, as evidenced by the DOJ not bringing any charges. Here's more from Thomas Massie.
What's more is that was taxpayer money, right? There may be some on this dais. I mean, I'm for turning loose all of these records. Who in here has had the taxpayer pay for their sexual misconduct charges the hush money? I bet there's some over there. There may be some over here. I don't know, but I do know it's taxpayer money, and I do know not a single penny of it has been turned in as a campaign finance expense. Is the FEC going to investigate the $17 million that the Congress has paid to settle, behind closed doors, these sexual misconduct allegations?
All right. So, that's Thomas Massey, and I think he's got a great point. By the way, at the time, he wasn't specifically speaking about the allegations against Matt Gaetz. And also, just so you know, I have no idea what Matt Gaetz actually did and what he didn't. Maybe there's going to be more information that comes forward. I don't know. But what I do know, and I want to go back to, and then I'm going to move on, but there was one part of the story that I thought was really interesting and really telling, as a matter of fact. Because part of what they said is that, and this is from the Associated Press, the committee found that between 2017 and 2020, Matt Gaetz paid tens of thousands of dollars to women, and this is a quote, likely in connection with sexual activity and or drug use. They use the term likely. Well, if you're destroying someone's political career, you shouldn't be using the term likely. You better darn right well know. Because they spent a lot of money, I'm assuming, on resources for this report. So I'm just telling you that from what I can tell, this whole thing does seem like it was a witch hunt targeted at Matt Gaetz. I like how he has gone after the DOJ. I like how he's spoken truth to power in Congress, and we'll have to see really how he does in his role at One American News. I think that's going to be really interesting, and we'll see if he actually does any kind of investigation work into his former colleagues in Congress. I think that would be fascinating. 866-90-RED has a phone number, 866-907-3339.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Smart owner-operators make every single week as profitable as possible. One trip is not enough time to be considered profitable or unprofitable, and an entire month may be too much time to manage. 1 week is the right amount of time to deal with efficiently. To do so, look at the advantages and disadvantages of every day of the week. Match trip length to the optimum day of the week. Plan to deliver on the day you have the best opportunity of getting a load. Your personal weekly plan will vary depending on the weekly delivery flow cycle of your region, typical length of haul, personal requirements, and other factors. What's important is to have a specific weekly plan that helps you be successful. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics. Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339, and Jonathan is calling in. Hey, Jonathan, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Republican, but, the whole Matt Gaetz thing, it's like, so he's, I guess allegedly he slept with a 17-year-old girl. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really seem like a witch hunt so much as he got caught up in something he shouldn't been doing, and now it's all over the news. Obviously,
hey, Jonathan, and it's a valid point. Although the question is, did he commit any crimes? The DOJ says no, and I'm not defending him. Just so we're clear, I'm not defending him just because he is a Republican. I'm looking at all of this. I'm looking at the credibility of the witnesses, and I'm looking at the credibility of the evidence. And to me, it doesn't look good for the accusers. I mean, and look, Matt Gaetz doesn't look good here either, just so we're clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's my main thing is, like, I just can't, I mean, I don't support him if that's true at all. I mean, like, I can't back the dude, you know. He's off the plane, gone, and I'm completely fine with that. I don't want that to be what the Republican Party is about, or, you know, so I don't want someone like that being affiliated with the Republican Party in general, so.
Yeah, and listen, Jonathan, and I appreciate the call, that is a fair point. Because it's clear, and I told the story, it is clear that Matt Gaetz was living large. And it's clear that, and here's the, and as Jonathan is talking about the 17-year-old, she didn't tell him she didn't tell him that she was under 18, but he didn't ask. And I think that is a mistake that Matt Gaetz did make.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. By the way, coming up, some really, really bad news for Democrats. Details straight ahead. Want to say hello to, this is Bill calling from Los Angeles on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Bill.
Hey, how you doing, Dan?
I'm all right. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, I've been kind of following Joe Biden's career ever since I became a journalism student at Columbia University back in the mid-'80s. And as you recall, he got bounced out of the 1988 presidential race for being just a blatant plagiarist. And as a former professional writer and a teacher, I consider plagiarism a sociopathic condition. It's some kind of weird narcissism that people think they deserve the credit for what other people do. And that's one of the factors that explains Joe Biden's behavior. The other one, which is even more disturbing of the last, 10 years since his son died of cancer, he apparently blames the U.S. military for putting his son in near chemicals or something that he alleged caused his son's brain cancer, and he's always harping on that. And if you look at a lot of the things he's done since then, including his other son's dealings with Burisma and his own alleged crooked deals with Chinese front companies, everything that guy does seems to be taking his revenge on the United States.
You know, one of the things, and Beau Biden, just so people don't know, if they don't know, Beau Biden was in the military, and he was around these burn pits. And so Biden always blamed these burn pits and the chemicals on giving Beau Biden cancer, and he eventually died. And there's a lot of our members of the military who have died because of cancer that was caused by these burn pits. But, you know, here's the thing, is that even though he has a resentment against America, it does seem, Bill, like he is on a one-man mission to destroy America. But, you know, part of the conversation, though, has to be, and Bill, I'm glad you called tonight because, you know, over the last couple of days, we've had that Wall Street Journal article where there has been this massive cover-up on Joe Biden's mental faculties and how his brain has just been disintegrating since before day one of his presidency. And there's been this massive cover-up within the Biden administration. I'm sure you know the story as reported by the Wall Street Journal. One of the things that I harped on yesterday, actually, last night, was that this is not only a monumental scandal politically, but also the media as well, because they stood right there, right by covering for Joe Biden until they really couldn't anymore. He was misspeaking. He was wandering around. He was lost. He was calling out for dead congresswomen. It goes on and on and on. And how stunning was it that during the White House press briefing on Friday, when that story came out, that not one journalist in that room asked about that report from the Wall Street Journal. I believe it's because they know that they are culpable as well. And so, Bill, with your background in journalism, I'm wondering what you thought about that story.
Well, it's horrifying. And again, I've told you a number of times over the last couple of years that I didn't know anybody in 1985 and 86 at Columbia University who would have had that kind of reaction if President Reagan had been, walking around talking to dead people and that kind of stuff. I mean, they gave Reagan a hard enough time just for dozing off, but it was nothing in comparison to the Biden debacle. And again, I'm totally unfamiliar with that kind of thinking by people who falsely claim that they're reporters. They're not. They're a bunch of clowns. They're a bunch of self-promoters. They have no regard for the First Amendment that provides their platform. So I don't relate to these people. And if all of us who were just, had a pulse saw in 2020 when Biden started making all these weird slips and calling people by the wrong names and just saying random things, we knew there was a problem. But then, the media, as you point out, they helped hide it by letting him get away with doing his campaign from the basement, avoiding press conferences. And I'll tell you, like, if Richard Nixon or Ronald Reagan had tried to avoid the press the way Biden and Harris did, there would have been hell to pay to the media. So, this is just it's more than just Joe Biden, but I was just focusing originally on his own personality, and I think it fits in perfectly with the Democrat Party, the modern Democrat Party, which itself is trying to destroy the Constitution, including the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the free flow of information. So, they were all built for each other. Biden and the modern Democratic Party were made for each other. And I think there are separate things going on with each, but it's a close fit.
Bill, I absolutely appreciate that, and I agree with you as well. And I always appreciate you calling when I'm hosting for Gary and Eric on Red Eye Radio. And you just heard Bill talking about the Democrats and what they stand for. Part of the news cycle today is this headline: Democrat Party, their brand is in the toilet. Joe Manchin did an interview. Now, you know who Joe Manchin is, right? He's the senator and out of West Virginia, a Democrat, very moderate. He did an interview this week that made a lot of headlines where he blasted the Democrat Party. And he says that these days, no, I'm no Democrat. Now, realize Joe Manchin comes from a Democrat family. So his entire family, including, I believe, his father, was a Democrat, a politician as well in West Virginia. And he says that the party itself has really betrayed what it stands for.
I am not a Democrat in the form of what the Democratic Party has turned itself into. The national brand, absolutely not. And they know that.
I mean, listen, I think they do know that. Let's all be honest. I mean, Kamala Harris, she was an absolute train wreck because they thought that they could get away. And this is the crazy thing. They thought that they could get away with media manipulation, paying the likes of Oprah Winfrey and Beyonce and some of these other folks with making appearances. Who is it? Al Sharpton? Was it Al Sharpton? He made, was it $500,000 for that piece of crap interview on MSNBC? And now you've got all of these churches that are out there, and the churches are saying to MSNBC that Al Sharpton should be fired, should be taken off the air. Because they gave him, the Harris campaign gave him $500,000 for a friendly softball interview. And Sharpton didn't even tell MSNBC that he had received monies from the Harris campaign. So that is a betrayal to their viewers. And that is a betrayal to journalism, although I think that no one really expects Al Sharpton to be a journalist, obviously, but still. And here's the other funny thing about that, and then I'll get back to the Joe Manchin comments. But with Al Sharpton, he got $500,000 for a layup interview that he would have done for free. these are the kind of mistakes that the Democrats and Kamala Harris made. I mean, they raised $1 billion and they ended in the losing column and $20 million in the hole. So they are the party of lies. They are the party of corruption. And they're the party of incompetence. And according to Joe Manchin, they understand that.
The brand got so bad. The D brand has been so maligned from the standpoint of it's toxic.
Yeah, the brand, the Democrat Party, is toxic because it's not, and I think that we all know this, it's not a party of the people unless you're trans or an illegal alien. Other than that, they don't care about you, the American people. Gloria Romero was on Fox News, and they were talking about this brand of the Democrat Party. And she's in California. And she's decided to walk away from the Democrat Party because she does agree with Joe Manchin that the Democrats are in trouble.
Welcome, Senator Manchin, to the walkaway movement. The Democratic Party has lost its way. It's leaderless. It's like that proverbial chicken without a head. Nobody knows who's running the country. Biden and Harris are in hiding. Even President Obama, who is seen as the titular head of the party, he's gone into a missing persons conundrum as well. Nancy Pelosi is hospitalized. But I think at the end of the day, people, the Democratic Party, whoever was running this party that had lost its way, forgot that it was about America first.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a flip. I mean, Donald Trump has redefined the Republican Party, and the Democrats have redefined their own party. It's not the party. The Democrats are not the party of America first. Clearly not. It's the party of all other countries first, as we accept all of their migrants or illegal aliens. I mean, there's a reason why the Democrats lost. There's a reason why Kamala Harris lost. And it is because of all of the things that Gary and Eric and folks in talk radio talk about every single day. Because the Democrats have been all about crime first, illegal aliens first, and the trans community. And allowing boys to play on girls' teams. And now, as we've been talking about tonight, you've got Joe Biden commuting the sentences of 37 people on death row federally. People that are child rapists and child killers, cop killers, and so forth. And Joe Biden put their lives ahead of the victims' families. And so the brand of the Democrat Party, not only is it toxic, but it's also pro-crime. It's pro-criminal. And so now the fact that the Republicans, many, are advocating for the child tax credit, I thought this was interesting. I think this was last week, where they're advocating for the child tax credit to be increased to $5,000. I mean, that's huge. And proof that the Republicans have changed. There's a lot of Republicans that vehemently disagree with that. But there's other Republicans like J.D. Vance that are all for it. Because J.D. Vance is saying, yeah, we are the pro-family party. And so we ought to reward those that voted for Donald Trump and the pro-family party with a $5,000 child tax credit. And so some conservatives and Republicans are losing their minds on this. Why? Well, because for many years, we've been calling that a subsidy. We've been calling that welfare. Why should people pay? Why should taxpayers at large pay for the children of some Americans? And so it's a valid conversation to have. But the bottom line is that the Republicans have been putting America first for years. But it's even more magnified with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and this current version of the Democrat Party. And this Gloria Romero, she mentions Barack Obama. His entire legacy is destroyed because of how he handled Joe Biden's presidency. He was, by and large, running the show, and he knew of Joe Biden's mental abilities as they were collapsing in front of our eyes. Barack Obama lied big time. And don't forget, he also told black men they were racist if they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. That didn't go over too well either. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. You know, I haven't even gotten to the best part of my soliloquy on why the Democrat Party is in really, really big trouble. Did you see this video from the New York Times? They did a video, and I'm going to be able to get into quite a bit of detail coming up after the news here at the top of the hour. But check me out on socials at Dan Mandis Show, on X, and also on Facebook. Posted on my X is this video from the New York Times where they talk about how the Democrats are in really big trouble. Details straight ahead.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis. This is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis, indeed, in for Gary and Eric. They return after the first of the year, talking about the Democrats and how Joe Manchin, and by the way, he's not the only one, but Joe Manchin this week said that the party, the brand, is in the toilet. And basically he says that a big part of the Democrat Party is toxic. And I think that he's absolutely right. And I was playing you the audio of Gloria Romero, and she is, and you folks in California know, that she is a California state lawmaker, and she walked away from the Democrat Party. And she was talking about why there are so many people walking away from the Democrat Party. And I will tell you that part of this story is also how people are walking away or moving away from Democrat-run states. But she was talking about Obama, where, remember, back during the election, he was lecturing black men on why they were not voting for or supporting Kamala Harris. And he basically said that they were sexist if they refused to support Kamala Harris. And so that did not go over well. And so Romero was on Fox News, and she was talking about the incredibly damaged brand of the Democrat Party.
That it was about liberty and freedom, that it was about family, that it was about faith, that it was about the Constitution and the rights of individuals. And Senator Manchin, though, unfortunately, on his way out the door, said he hopes for a new American party, not realizing that that party today and tomorrow will be and is the Republican Party under an America First Trump-led party. That's why I left the Democratic Party, and I was a loyal blue Democrat in California.
Yeah, I mean, listen, she's right. I mean, the Democrats, this last election, it really did seem like they were all about the woke stuff and protecting illegals and trying to convince us that the cost of groceries was down and that crime was down and the border was closed, all of which, of course, as we all know, they were lies over the last 4 years.
This party refuses to recognize that it has lost its way. It's a chapter. It's, gone with the wind. And basically, we are seeing the end of this. Whether a new party emerges, that will wait to be seen. But people like Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema as well, who also tried to be somewhat of a moderate to get the party back on track and be a little bit sensible left. Leo Terrell, myself, Bobby Kennedy, even Donald J. Trump at one point.
I mean, she's absolutely right. She also, I mean, you heard what she said, right? And I think it's an interesting conversation. Because what she said was the Democrat Party, as we know it, is dead. That they quite possibly cannot recover from what we just saw. Because Donald Trump and the Republicans absolutely flipped the script. And she says, yeah, the Democrat Party, as we know it, it's gone. Now, can something else rise from the ashes? Perhaps. But right now, we'll see what happens with Donald Trump. She also said, by the way, Gloria Romero, she also said that both Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, they are clinging to the progressive and the leftist ideals that destroyed the party here in the last 4 years. I mean, this is like an hour-long conversation. Because there is the perpetual lies of the Biden administration and the progressive values and policy of the Biden administration as well. All of this has proved to be fatal as far as the current Democrat Party. I mean, they lost the election. We've got the majority in the Senate, and we've got the majority. We kept the majority in the House, although it's close. But it's also at the state level. So we can talk about the damaged brand of the Democrat Party at the national level, or we can also talk about it at the state level, because it is at the state level as well. We've been talking about this forever, my friends, where there's this migration that is happening, where Americans are fleeing states like California. They're fleeing states like Illinois and New York. If you know anything about my history, you know, as I've been filling in for Red Eye here for the last several years, you know that I was born and raised in California. And I am one of those people that fled California. Just couldn't take it anymore. The crime was out of control. I couldn't afford a better neighborhood. I was watching my neighborhood disintegrate amongst crime and illegal immigration. And I said to my wife, I said, we can't keep doing this. And we fled. And so the New York Times put out, and I know that a lot of you folks listening right now in the great state of Tennessee, where I currently live, or the great state of Texas, or the great state of Florida, all of these more Republican states that have benefited from a lot of these folks leaving California, leaving Illinois, leaving New York, leaving Minnesota. So the New York Times puts out a video, and it's a really good video. And it's, I think, about 2 minutes and 32 seconds of why the Democrats are in big trouble, not only at the national level, but at the state level as well.
Democrats, forget the last election. Winning future ones might be about to get even harder. And it's got nothing to do with the border or inflation or trans rights or Trump, and everything to do with the numbers on this spreadsheet. They reveal how many Americans pack up their things and move from one state to another. It's a lot, more than 7 million people in 2023. Now, my colleague Benjamin Applebaum, he writes about the economy for the New York Times. He went through this whole spreadsheet, scouring 2 decades worth of data, and he found something that should strike fear into every Democrat. Millions of people have moved out of California, New York, Illinois, and other blue states, and they're moving to Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, red ones.
Yeah, think of the crime. Think of the cost of living. Think of the politics. Think of the woke and the business environment, the regulations, the crappy schools. All of this defines California, defines Illinois, defines New York and Minnesota. And that's why people are leaving. All of these things have forced people to move from those blue states, and they're going to the red ones.
Some are drawn by new manufacturing jobs. Others are pulled by finance and tech hubs. But it's mostly teachers, police officers, dentists, people who just want a more affordable quality of life. People also move to blue states, of course, but in smaller numbers. In fact, over the last 20 years, 9 million more people migrated from blue to red than in the other direction. And Democrats, this is bad news for you.
Now, I want to make sure that you heard that, right? 9 million more people moved from blue states to red than red to blue. I live in Tennessee. I grew up in California. I lived in California for a good part of my adult life. You couldn't get me to move to California for anything. I'm sorry, you folks in California. I'm not insulting you. But your state is run by idiots, led by Gavin Newsom. And part of what's going on is that a lot of the people that are going into California, they're illegal aliens. And so that also is a problem for the Democrats. And so part of what's going on is that you have these folks that are coming into California, and they're not nearly the number as people that are leaving. Now, the reason why this is a big deal, the reason why this is bad news, is because of, among other things, congressional representation.
Why? Because the size of a state's population determines how many electoral college votes it receives. The next national census takes place in 2030, and assuming the migration flows on this spreadsheet continue until then, look what happens. California loses 4 votes, New York loses 3, Illinois loses 2, and other blue states like Minnesota, Oregon, and Rhode Island all lose a vote. And they go, just like the people, to those red states. In total, this reallocation could cost Democrats 12 electoral college votes. And don't forget, this would be locked in for a decade until the next census.
Yeah, and the states that'll be gaining are Texas, Tennessee, Florida, and other red states. And so, yeah, that is bad news for those Democrat-run states, those blue states. Remember, part of what they've been trying to do, in my opinion, and there's been a lot of politicians that have said this as well, is that the blue states are actually hoping to attract all of these illegal aliens because they are counted in the census, and that means that they do get counted for representation's sake in the House of Representatives. But here's the thing. Republicans are working on reversing that policy.
So if your 2032 candidate wins exactly the same number of states as Kamala Harris just did, they won't get 226 votes. They'll only get 214. Democrats have been dreaming for decades that these population shifts would help turn red states purple. Instead, Texas and Florida have simply become bigger red states.
Yeah.
Now look, a lot could change before the next census in 5 years, but blue states are going to have to change first. People still want to live in California and New York, but the cost of living must come down. If the Democratic governors of these states want to avoid a decade of electoral oblivion, they have one job: make their states places people can afford to stay.
Well, there is that, and there's also the problem with crime and all the other things that I talked about. Crime illegal immigration, bad schools, gangbangers, and the rest of it. So it's not just about being able to afford it, but there's a lot of other lifestyle issues as well. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. Let's say hello to Tom, calling from Annapolis, Maryland on Red Eye Radio. Tom, thanks for calling in.
Good morning, sir. Great show. I wanted to bring up the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. I think a lot of people in the Democrat Party are culpable, and they should be impeached for violating the 25th Amendment, and I'll paraphrase it. When the vice president deduces or concludes that the president is incapable, either physically or mentally, to continue serving as president, he, or in this case she, shall report to senior officials of the government, which is implied as the cabinet and, the leaders in the Senate and the House of Representatives. He or she will tell them, and they use the word shall, which is the military, is you're ordered to tell everybody that the president is off his rockers and we need to do something. And there's a whole lot of people who are culpable. I'm talking Pelosi, Schumer, Harris. They all should be impeached right now because they chose their party over our beautiful country.
Well, Tom, Tom, what I would say is two things. Number one is Harris is gone, or she will be here in the next couple of weeks. That's number one. But number two, I want a full investigation into who knew what when. And I'm talking about Kamala Harris. I'm talking about Schumer. I'm talking about Pelosi. I'm even talking about Jill Biden. They all knew what was going on.
And I was getting to the point of saying that I know they're gone. They're going to be gone, but I would go after their fat pensions. I would actually want to put them in jail if I could. I don't know if that's possible, but they chose. It's treasonous. What they're doing is horrible. And you have a great show, and you were talking about who's in charge right now. Who's really running the country right now. Well, if we Americans don't know, either do the Chinese or Russians. And I'm retired military. I think if I were China, I'd be invading Taiwan right now because America doesn't even know who the hell's running it.
No, and I don't think Joe Biden knows who is running the country either. And, Tom, I very much appreciate the call. Very quickly, John is in Arkansas on Red Eye Radio. Hey, John, go ahead.
Hey, Dan, great show. I'm also a fellow Californian, and it got worse. I left in 2017. I'd go back to that state, but the way the politics are going, I wouldn't go for that reason. The state is beautiful. The people that run it are jerks and idiots. I call them the demo rats because they hide in dark places. When you ask them a question, they don't know what's going on. They're using their own thing to say, hey, this is what we want, and then they go to Trump's thing, Trump's agendas. Mm-hmm. And they just use people. They just do whatever to get their foot in the door of the club and get in. So
well, the crazy thing, the crazy thing, John, and I appreciate the call. The crazy thing on that is that it's clear that the policies of the Democrat Party simply do not work. I mean, it's obvious that they don't. All you have to do is look at California and look at New York and look at Chicago or Illinois and look at these cities and states that have been run by Democrats, and they are indeed a train wreck. And I do blame the politicians, but I also blame the people of California, the people of New York, the people of Illinois, who continue to put the same party in place that is train wrecking these cities and these states. And John, I appreciate the call. 866-90-RED-EYE. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. It is Christmas Eve morning. Appreciate you listening. Very quickly, this is Frank calling from Las Vegas. Frank, thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
What has to happen? I'm responding to your second caller. This isn't rocket scientist, rocket science. When you're a bowler, golfer, a baseball hitter, and you go into a slump, you got to go back to basics. Our basics as a country is the second greatest document ever written. And after that document got ratified, they said, okay, and they understood. They were landowners. They were brilliant men. They said, who votes? And you got to remember, there was slavery in the country. Well, you had to be a male. Women weren't allowed to work back then, almost up until the late 50s and 40s. Yes, there were. I'm not getting into the overall that you were the stigma of what you were expected to do as a woman. But the point being, we've got to. You have to have skin in the game to vote. You've got to go back to owning your house, and if you have a lien on it, you can't vote. You can vote if you have an honorable discharge and you have a lien on the house. If you've done 2 tours of jury duty, you can vote. But if you get summoned for jury duty again, and you get selected and you get out of jury duty, you don't vote for 4 years.
Frank, hold on.
What?
So,
yeah,
where in the Constitution does it stipulate like who could vote and who can't, other than being a citizen of the country? I mean, you can't say that if there's a legal. Frank, hold on, Frank, hold on. If you say that you can't vote because there's a lien on your home, do you know how many people have had liens put on their home unfairly?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm saying, if not a lien, and that was, but.
Well, sorry, I love you, Frank. I'm out of time, but I appreciate the call, and better luck next time.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning. No, I should say, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'm so used to saying that. They return after the first of the year. I want to get to, and I haven't gotten to it yet this morning, and I really need to, because it's a big story. You've heard the story about the woman that was set on fire in New York. We talked about this before, where there's a woman, and she's sitting on the subway in New York, and an illegal alien from Guatemala just comes up and sets her on fire. It is the craziest story, and nobody helped. And so there's a number of things that are going on here, but I want to remind you of what AOC said about Daniel Penny. Remember this? She was talking about, you know who Daniel Penny is, right? He's the guy that saved a bunch of people on a subway car in New York, and the guy ultimately that Daniel Penny put the guy in a chokehold, the guy eventually died. This is what AOC said about Daniel Penny.
And so the fact that a person may express no remorse indicates that there's a risk that it may happen again. And if we do not want to unleash that level of violence, then we should exert a level of accountability to prevent that from happening again.
So one of the big parts of the story in New York about the woman that was set on fire and she died, and it was an illegal alien from Guatemala that did it, is that nobody helped the woman. If you scroll down on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show, you'll see that there's a video that went viral. And the woman is just standing there. I pointed this out last night when I first saw the video. The woman is just standing there. And she's literally on fire. And nobody helped. And people are saying, well, that's the Daniel Penny effect. The reason why nobody helped this woman is because they were, quite frankly, afraid to even get involved, because Daniel Penny got hauled into court and he got all kinds of trumped up charges against him because there was a guy in the very same subway system who was threatening a subway car full of passengers, and Penny put him in a chokehold and the guy ultimately died. And she's saying, well, Daniel Penny didn't have any remorse. She doesn't know jack about Daniel Penny. She doesn't. He protected all of those people on the subway. I don't know if he felt remorse or not. In the question that I would ask is, should he feel any remorse over the fact that this Jordan Neely died? Nobody knew what he would do on that subway car. But he was acting erratically, and he was threatening people. So I don't know about you, but I don't believe that Daniel Penny needed to feel any remorse whatsoever. He was probably ticked off because he was being accused of purposely killing this person, or it seemed like that's what they were accusing him of. And so then he had to spend all this money on attorneys. And of course, as you know, he ultimately was found, thank the Lord, not guilty. But why didn't anybody help that woman that was on fire? You got all these people that are pulling out their phones and they're videoing her standing in the middle of the subway car on fire. And you got all these people that have all these big heavy jackets on. Nobody thought that it would be a good idea to take off the jacket and put it on the woman to try to smother the flames. Curtis Sliwa says nobody wants to get involved any longer because if they went after Daniel Penny, they can go after you for just becoming involved. And so I would ask AOC, because I just played you that audio, I would ask AOC, since she seems so incredibly concerned about remorse and accountability, does she feel like she has any accountability? Given the fact that she, in New York, as a New York congresswoman, has been so welcoming to the illegal aliens, like the one that killed that innocent woman. And yet again, here we are with another American that is tragically and horrifically killed by an illegal alien. A guy named Nick Sorter confronted AOC about all of these illegal aliens in her district, and there's a lot. And he wanted to ask her about all of this illegal alien crime, and it didn't go well for Nick.
Yeah, so your district is really suffering under the pressure of the border crisis. Thank you. Why are... I'm sorry, don't touch me.
Yeah, her people won't let Nick Sorter get within, 5 feet of her.
What? Your district is very much suffering through the border crisis. Why will you not? No, get out of my way.
Excuse me, sir. And she's trying to get to AOC, and she's walking upstairs, and she won't allow him to ask the question. So he's resigned. He's relegated to shouting, and she just keeps on walking. And her goons won't allow this guy to ask her the question. And she clearly won't answer the question.
Dude, get your hands off of me. What?
You're gonna fall down the stairs, man.
Relax. Stop touching me. Stop touching me. Are you talking to the Biden administration about fixing the border? Get off of me. What is wrong with you?
That's how it went. And you can hear how angry he is. And here's the thing that I would say to AOC. Here's the thing that I would say to the Democrats who are pro-illegal alien. Wouldn't it be nice if all of the women in New York and all of the women across the country had their own goons, if you will, to protect them against the illegal aliens, like AOC's goon kept Nick Sorter away from AOC so that she wouldn't have to answer that question. AOC and our, well, I'm not going to call them representatives, but these Congress people, they have protection. You don't. And I think if there's one incident that really shows the damn hypocrisy of these people in Washington, D.C., it is that AOC, who has her own security, refuses to answer a question about an illegal alien that set a woman on fire. And that woman did not have her own personal security, but AOC does. And she's all about being in a sanctuary city. She's all about protecting the bad guys. She's all about letting all of these people in, but she herself is not held accountable. Because Democrats don't actually believe in holding people accountable. They just don't. Unless it's a white guy, former Marine, who is actually trying to protect a bunch of people and he accidentally kills a person who's black. That's when all of a sudden the Democrats, they want all of this accountability. It's unbelievable, the gall of these people in Washington, D.C. It's absolutely shameful. Because I would love to know what the hell what is her comment about the fact that she and all these other Democrats are so welcoming of illegal aliens and their sanctuary city status. They're revered among the Democrat Party. Their revered status as a sanctuary city. To hell with the American citizens. They're just being set on fire. Illegal alien from Guatemala walks up to this woman and she is sleeping in the subway car. Sebastian Zapata Khalil walks up to her with a lighter and sets her on fire. Now he's being charged with murder and arson in the first degree. So apparently the woman, again, was sleeping and he lights her on fire. There's some things that I don't understand on this story. Like, I don't know if he used an accelerant, but, I mean, if you see the video, not only is nobody helping her, but she doesn't take off her clothes. She doesn't drop to the ground and try to sort of, drop and roll and try to put the... She doesn't do anything like that. She's just standing there. It's very strange, actually. The whole thing is just sad. But apparently this guy, Zapata Khalil, told police that he was too boozed up to remember anything and that he has been staying in shelters around New York. Anonymous sources have told the New York Post that Zapata Khalil was in the country illegally after previously being deported at the Arizona border in June of 2018 by the administration of Donald Trump. So he snuck in. I think it was a few days later they deport him, and then he snuck right back in. Federal immigration officials said Zapata Khalil was nabbed in Arizona after crossing the U.S. border illegally on June 1st of 2018, deported 6 days later. Under Donald Trump. Snuck in, deported him, and then he came back in. They say he managed to sneak back in at some point, and in March of 2023 was living in a city-run shelter, the first of several in Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. So that's going to be, one of the big questions is going to be, okay, so how did he get in? Like, did he come across our wide open southern border under Joe Biden? I don't know. But here's the bigger point. The bigger point is that these guys are in our country. They've clearly got mental illness. And the Democrats who, again, with AOC talking about how she is so worried about accountability and remorse. Okay, AOC, Do you have any remorse promoting and encouraging and supporting sanctuary city status? Do you have any remorse on that at all, AOC? What about accountability? Do you feel like you should, you and the Democrats should have any accountability, experience any accountability for what you have done? Well, the people in her district hold her accountable because Democrats actually don't believe in holding people accountable. They just don't. By the way, everybody is talking about how Tom Homan responded to all of this. As you can imagine, he's horrified like we all are.
This is another example of an illegal alien killing American citizens. It's almost a daily occurrence now. You know, because historic number of criminal aliens walking the streets because of this administration's policy in sanctuary jurisdictions and lax immigration enforcement. ICE has their hands tied. As far as Governor Hochul, shame on her. She supports sanctuary status in that state. She welcomed thousands of illegal aliens to her state. She sent them to Buffalo and Syracuse. So, Governor Hochul, shame on you. There's nothing you can say that's going to make this right in New York.
No, and Hochul is out there. I actually thought that it was a typo, but apparently, because, you know, she'd come out, we talked about this yesterday, where she came out with a video and she was talking about and taking like a victory lap, like, oh, look, our subways are safe again. And then just hours after she put the video out, the woman was set on fire. But apparently, here in the aftermath of that horrific story, Kathy Hochul is still out there trying to say that their subways are safe when clearly they're not. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis. Follow me on X and Facebook at Dan Mandis Show. We'll return next right here on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Eight 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Eric and Gary. They do return after the first of the year. Donald Trump, this is part of what he said over the weekend at America Fest.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will sign a historic slate of executive orders to close our border to illegal aliens and stop the invasion of our country.
Well, that is, of course, the president-elect, and Tom Homan had a really interesting tweet, and he's talking about the mass deportations, he says, that are about to begin, and he tweeted out a map of states with the numbers of illegal aliens that are going to possibly be deported. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more straight ahead. It's Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Illegal immigration seemingly always in the news. I also have coming up a great response from Scott Jennings, of course, as we like to say, the lone voice of reason over on CNN, as he was talking about the Joe Biden commutations from yesterday. So we're going to get into all of that and a whole lot more right here on Red Eye Radio. This is what Donald Trump said over the weekend regarding closing the border and illegal immigration.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will sign a historic slate of executive orders to close our border to illegal aliens and stop the invasion of our country.
Yeah, and of course, as you can imagine, that got a big applause, as it should. Tom Homan this is really interesting. Tom Homan has posted to, I guess this is his X account, the number of people eligible for deportation in every single state, right? So, of course, and this is Tom Homan, borders our commentary. He's got a check mark and everything. And so it says, do you know how many people in your state are eligible to be mass deported? And so you've got the state of California, 2 million. You've got the state of Texas, 1.7 million. My state of Tennessee, only 100,000. You've got Florida, 900,000. You've got the state of Washington, 200,000, 120,000 in Oregon, and on it goes. And so the when you look at this, and I'll go ahead and let me see if I can go ahead and I'm going to repost this right now. If you want to see it, you can find me on X at Dan Mandis Show. You can also follow me on Facebook as well at Dan Mandis Show. I mean, look, we got, 29, 28 days, whatever it is left. I'm terribly doing math, especially on the radio. But I can tell you that there are many, many, many people who are counting down the days to when Donald Trump takes that oath of office and the mass deportations, courtesy of Tom Homan and Donald Trump, begin on day one. And so there's a lot of, listen, it is New Year's Eve morning, and there's a lot of news that is going on. And one of the biggest stories, of course, was the Joe Biden commutations. Now, this landed right as I was getting off the air here on Red Eye Radio last night. But it's abhorrent. And you know that there's a lot of people across our country who are absolutely horrified at the thought that Joe Biden decided that it would be a good idea to commute 37 death row inmates at the federal level. They are now sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I mean, you are talking about, friends, the absolute worst of the worst. You're talking about child rapists. You're talking about child killers. You're talking about cop killers. You're talking about people that have done reprehensible things to women, including kill them, obviously. And so one of the things that I noticed, and I did cover this earlier, the Matt Gaetz situation, the Matt Gaetz and the House Ethics Committee coming out with their report. And so the media yesterday, I thought it was interesting because they were absolutely hyper-focused on that and completely ignoring Joe Biden and his commutations. And so you've got Scott Jennings, and he was, again, on CNN. And they had him on this segment, and he was asked to come on to talk about Matt Gaetz and that ethics report. And Jennings, like I would, and a lot of you probably did as well, if you actually watch CNN, Jennings calls BS.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be candid with you. I don't make much of it because most of the details or most of the stories that we heard, we already knew. I mean, a lot of this stuff was already swirling in the public domain anyway. Number two, Matt Gaetz is no longer in Congress. Number three, Matt Gaetz is no longer under consideration to be in Donald Trump's cabinet. As far as I'm concerned, he's a private citizen in Florida, and I'm sure he has a story to tell about this. And if he runs for office again, he'll have to, explain what's in this report, and we'll see what the voters say about this. But honestly, of all the things that happened in Washington, D.C. today, to me, this is a low priority when you consider what Joe Biden did over at the White House, commuting all the sentences of these terrible people using the power of the presidency. He's still in office. Gaetz is gone, and yet there seems to be more outrage about Gaetz over stuff that, frankly, is old news.
Right, and it's kind of interesting, too, because if you heard that little right at the end, you heard, as Scott Jennings is saying, this is old news. You hear the one of the leftists on CNN that was kind of smirking at what Jennings was saying. But he is absolutely right. I mean, there really wasn't anything new with the Matt Gaetz report, the ethics report that came out on Matt Gaetz. Nothing really new. But Joe Biden commuting the sentences of 37 federal death row inmates. Now they are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, but they're granted life. They're granted life. And so what Joe Biden has done is he has once again horrified a good number of the American people. I mean, I don't care if you're like a Democrat, a moderate Democrat. Clearly, I would say that 90 to 99% of all Republicans are horrified by what Joe Biden did. Independents as well, moderates as well. Some of these folks on the way left, well, they're just hooray for our side and, oh, this is a great thing, which is absolutely insane. Thomas Stephen Sanders is one of these dirtbags that Joe Biden saved the life of. He killed a 12-year-old girl, shot her in cold blood. Eric Schmidt, a senator from Missouri, he was on to talk about this, equally as horrified as everyone else.
I think it's important to talk about the victims here. Lexis Roberts went on a camping trip with her mother and Thomas Sanders. Thomas Sanders, on the way back, took her mother out and executed her in cold blood in front of Lexis, then slit Lexis Roberts' throat and let her die in the woods. This is someone that Joe Biden, on the eve of Christmas, decided to commute his sentence. This is nuts. This is totally nuts. And so the outrage is real. It's justified. And again, Joe Biden on his way out is, again, cementing his status as one of our worst presidents.
Can you imagine? And now here's the deal. First of all, this is not just Joe Biden. I can hear you yelling at the radio. I'm right there with you. It's not just Joe Biden. It's the Democrats and whoever the hell is running the crap show at the White House. But can you imagine just before Christmas and you've got Biden's administration, the Democrats doing this? So if you're a parent or you have a loved one, one of these victims that these dirtbags killed, and they get to live their lives as opposed to facing death, and the Democrats did this. And so now if you're the parent of one of those people killed, or it was your loved one that was killed, now you clearly feel like there's no justice. I haven't seen Donald Trump, and maybe he did talk about this, maybe he did comment on this somewhere, but I would be willing to admit, I would be willing to bet that Donald Trump is against this. There's a Justice Department policy where if the victim's family wants to address a possible clemency or whatever, the family can actually request to make an oral presentation. Now, I don't know if the families were consulted. They should have been. Because not only did these 37 dirtbags kill children, rape women, kill police officers, but they also did it in horrific fashion. Not that it matters how they died, but the stories do matter. Did somebody really walk up to whoever is in charge and say, hey, I've got a great idea. Thomas Stephen Sanders killed a 12-year-old girl by slitting her throat and leaving her to die in the woods after he shot her mother in cold blood. You think it'd be a good idea to commute his sentence and save his life and allow him to live the rest of his natural life in prison on the taxpayer dime? Somebody actually in the Democrat Party thought that it would be a good idea. Isn't that amazing? And of course they didn't consult with the families. Of course they didn't. Clearly Biden and the Democrats, they simply don't care about the families of the victims. They don't. And you know who does is Donald Trump. I played this earlier, had a lot of reaction to it. You can find me on X at Dan Mandis Show. There was a moment during America Fest last weekend where Patty Marin, the mother of Rachel Marin, who was murdered by an illegal alien, as you know, spoke about Donald Trump. And Patty Marin talks about how he, unlike Joe Biden, does care about the families of victims.
And when you spoke to him, you could see in his eyes that he genuinely cared about his fellow human being. But the thing The thing I appreciate the most is that he heard the cries of a mother, and he cared. And he made a promise that he was going to protect us and that he was going to help us. And that's all you can ask from your president, but also just from a fellow human being. And so I personally, I am so honored to know this man and to think of you as a friend.
Just a very touching moment there at America Fest over the weekend as they had a bit of an embrace there. It's obvious that Donald Trump cares about the victims and their families. Joe Biden, the Democrats don't. And that's why so many people are horrified at the actions of the Democrats. Now, remember, part of this conversation is Joe Biden is Catholic, and the Pope and Joe Biden spoke by phone last week, and Pope Francis has been pressuring Joe Biden to commute these sentences, and Joe Biden did it. And to me, he betrayed America. He did. Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, said in a written statement following the decision, heralding the decision, these commutations are a significant step in advancing the cause of human dignity and respect for human life, from womb to tomb in our nation. Really? Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio? I mean, listen, I'm not bashing the Catholic religion, but when you allow a dirtbag who rapes and kills little boys and girls, kills people in cold blood, takes out cops and women and so forth, how is that showing respect for human life? I mean, we could debate this all day long, but I will tell you that when it comes to these kinds of people, they really do need to be put down like the dogs that they are. And by the way, no offense to the Catholic Church, but people always try to tie these two. How somehow if you're pro-life, then you are inconsistent if you are also pro-death penalty. Well, pro-life is about protecting the innocent. The death penalty is about consequences. The death penalty is about killing the guilty, killing those who have killed. But this is just part of Joe Biden's plan, where he and the Democrats, what they're trying to do is they're trying to Trump-proof America. Remember that that senator that we talked about before, Eric Schmidt from Missouri? He talks about how this is just part of the grander scheme by Joe Biden.
I can only imagine the grief and the shock that these families are experiencing as they get ready for the holidays, remembering the loved ones that were lost and now having to deal with this sort of insult to injury. And I think Joe Biden, in his effort to Trump-proof, we saw some of that, for the next administration, whether it's hiding DEI workers or things at the border. This is just beyond the pale. And I think he's cementing his status as one of the worst presidents in American history.
Yeah, by the way, the NAACP is all in on this, as you can imagine, not shocking at all. By the way, there were three folks that he did not commute. Robert Bowers, convicted for the mass shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. Dylan Roof, convicted of the shooting at the Mother Emanuel AME Church. And Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, convicted for the Boston Marathon bombing. There's some people, believe it or not, that are angry that he didn't also commute these guys. So just again, and I agree with the Senator Schmidt, this is just another example as to why Joe Biden will be considered as the worst president in history. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-90-RED-EYE. Dan Mandis will return next on Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at JJ Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. When driving, you need to manage the space around your vehicle so that there's enough space to allow you to adjust when traffic conditions change. The space ahead of your vehicle is the most important and one of the easiest to monitor and adjust as needed. One rule of thumb is to allow at least 1 second for each 10 feet of vehicle length at speeds below 40 miles per hour. At greater speeds, add an additional second. It's impossible to keep other drivers from tailgating you, but there are some things you can do to make it safer, such as increasing your following distance, avoiding quick lane changes, and slowing down. There are also several things you should do to ensure that there is plenty of space between the side of your vehicle and other vehicles. Don't hug the center line, avoid hugging the right side of the road, and avoid traveling alongside other vehicles in strong winds, especially crosswinds. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. That is where we find Wes in Fort Worth, Texas on Red Eye. Hey, Wes, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. What's going on? What do you got?
Well, you're talking about Joe Biden and the pardons and all the outrageous things he's doing, the outlandish things he's doing. You know, there's been situations throughout history where people will cozy up to the elderly that's mentally have lost it and talk them out of everything, get them to will all the family treasures to them. And that's been challenged in court over and over. I'm not sure this is legal what they're doing. I heard Joe Biden say over and over he's pro-death penalty. And
let's be honest. I don't think Joe Biden remembers what his actual policy platform is. I don't think he remembers his name half the time.
If he's not of sound mind, is any of this valid that's being done in his name?
Listen. Now, Wes, trust me when I say I'm not defending Joe Biden. I believe that what he has done is absolutely abhorrent. I don't think this is Joe Biden actually doing this. I do believe that this is, the Democrat Party. That being said, I don't know if the Republicans. Let's just play this out because it's actually a very interesting question. So let's say the Republicans end up investigating Biden, and they go through the investigations, and it turns out that what the Wall Street Journal reported was absolutely true, that it wasn't Joe Biden pulling the strings. Well, then can they in turn, can they challenge these commutations? And I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. We'd be in very unfamiliar territory, but I'm here to tell you there's a lot of things that I would like to see reversed. I don't think that's going to happen, but I am just telling you that, unfortunately, this will, I believe, have an impact on the entire Democrat Party because, again, people are horrified.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. By the way, Merry Christmas. It is, of course, as you no doubt know, it is Christmas Eve morning. And Bonnie is calling from Addison, Texas on Red Eye Radio. Bonnie, thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing good, Bonnie.
Happy holiday to you.
Thank you very much.
I really think that I have some type of an insight as to why people's beliefs have changed so much. And I really think that it's our school system in part have taught our children to really hate the country and hate capitalism. And I believe that has a large part to do with why people look at somebody and say, oh, my God, look at that person. They're so horrible. They should be dead or they should be this. And I really think that that has to do with a monstrous part of it. They don't teach the history of the country, why capitalism is great, why America is great. And I think that that has to do with a lot of people's beliefs in what is going on today. Joe Biden's a different story, I guess. As to Matt Gaetz, just one tiny point. Maybe it should be Eric Swalwell that's sitting there, and they should say to him, hey, how's Fang Fang, huh? Maybe that should be the case, right?
All right, Bonnie, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Trust me when I say I'm no Eric Swalwell fan. As far as your comments about our society, there's a number of things there. But one of the things that I would say is you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that there's so many problems with our schools, which is why I support school choice. But there's also a parenting problem. There is a parenting problem. There is a media problem in our country as well. There is a social media problem. I mean, and all of these things that I talk about, and I've been harping on a parenting problem here in America for years and years and years and years. And I'm just here to tell you that whether it's social media, whether it is media, there is an empathy problem that we are lacking in this country as well. And it's just, there's a lot of issues. And I think that there is a serious lack of parenting. I think that religion, sadly, a belief in God, and that is going by the wayside as well. Fewer people and fewer families are going to church. Families aren't. And I'm sorry this sounds so cliche to some of you folks, and I get it, because every time I go down this road, I got people that send me a note on Facebook or whatever, and they say, Mandis, you sound like Richie Cunningham. All right, well, you know what? I'm sorry, but families no longer eat dinner together. Hell, a lot of families don't even have a father in the house. I mean, that's another hour-long monologue. In other words, there's a lot of issues that we need to solve in this country. Most of them can be solved by proper parenting. Many of them can be solved by a father in the house. Now, sadly, you can't fix stupid. And there's a lot of people in this country, even if they had a father in the house, even if they had an intact family, they're still just dumb. And they have a completely bass-backwards perspective on a lot of things. I mean, for the life of me, I will never understand. I will never, ever understand how you have, roughly half of the people in this country believe that it's okay for their political party to welcome in, for example, illegal aliens, especially after all that we've seen. But there's still a lot of people that voted for Kamala Harris that we're going to vote for Joe Biden, even though they have done reprehensible things to our country. So there's a lot of problems out there. There really is. And I wish that I had the magic answer. I really do. I mean, some of you folks, you're baffled by what we see in America today. You're baffled by the political decisions that people make. We're baffled by the parenting decisions that people make. I mean, we see these things all the time. And I don't understand it. But there's a lack of God. There's a lack of parenting. There's a lack of journalism and honest media in this country to keep the politicians honest. And there's a lack of independent thought. There's a lot of people out there that just solely rely on what their favorite influencer says on social media, and they won't do their own research. And I know that during COVID, we were absolutely castigated. We were canceled. Our social media was shut down if we had the audacity to actually ask questions. Couldn't do that. Remember during COVID? During COVID, we taught the younger generation that it is wrong to think for ourselves. It is wrong to ask questions. It is wrong to criticize our government. It is wrong to question things. That in and of itself is wrong. So there's a lack of parenting, lack, in my opinion, of proper education. There's too much government censorship. I mean, I could go on. She's triggered. You know what? You triggered me right before Christmas, but I do appreciate the call, Bonnie. And this is Valerie in Chicago on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Valerie, go ahead.
Merry Christmas, Dan. I love your no-nonsense perspective.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about all the states years ago that instilled laws that police officers, when they pull you over, they can no longer ask for your papers, quote-unquote papers, if you are of the appearance of Hispanic heritage. I'm white. I'm a U.S. citizen. If I get pulled over by a police officer, they are asking for my papers, my license, my registration, my proof of insurance. Do you think that's going to change where everybody's going to get asked to see their papers again?
I don't know. I think that for me, where I want to focus, and I think we do need to focus, is getting the bad guys out. I think that Donald Trump and Tom Homan, they are where they need to be. These are state issues. And I believe that, yeah, absolutely. We need to know who's legal. We need to know who is illegal. And yeah, people need to be able to show their proof of citizenship. They need to be able to prove that they're licensed to drive. And in some states, whether or not they have insurance and so forth. But at the very least, and illegal immigration is a very big deal for a lot of people. And I'm right there with you. Trust me when I say. But part of what I would also say is that the big ticket item, if you will, the big ticket item is being able to close the border. That's number one. Close the border, which Donald Trump is going to be able to do effectively by re-implementing a lot of the things that Joe Biden did away with. For example, like remain in Mexico. Once Trump re-implements that on day one, then we'll be able to force all of these folks that want to come into our country. They've got to, wait for it, remain in Mexico while their cases are heard. That's huge because right now, Biden just lets all these folks in and they disappear and they dissolve into our country, never to be seen or heard from again until they're lighting some innocent person on fire in a subway car. I mean, that is why so many people are so outraged. I mean, I get the whole, police officers not being allowed to ask for people's papers and so forth. I get that, but I know this sounds crazy, but man, that just feels like we've got bigger fish to fry. We really do. And for me, and again, by and large, there's so many issues with illegal immigration that I think that we are in for a very, very rough 4 years. And we are. And, part of what we were talking about yesterday, I thought it was an interesting conversation where you have, a lot of people that are saying that we are way over our skis on clearly. And I agree that we're spending way too much money in this country. Yet at the same time, we're willing to say we don't care how much it costs. We need to get rid of all of these illegal aliens, no matter the cost. And I actually agree with that. Because when you look at it, I do understand that it is going to cost a lot of money for these folks to be deported. But at the same time, also a cost, and just follow me here, there is a cost to keeping them here. That's number one. Number two, by utilizing mass deportation, then you are also pulling out that welcome mat that Joe Biden and the Democrats have put in place. And so if we can stop the constant flow of people coming into our country, that is huge. And that is ultimately what we need to do. And so that does save money in the long run. Now, I want to do my favorite video of the day. This is so funny. So this is making the rounds today. You can find it on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. The video starts with viral surveillance video by the Seal Beach, California Police Department, and it happened over the weekend, last weekend, I guess, where 3 women can be seen walking into an Ulta beauty store, browsing the shelves, and they stole $650 worth of merchandise. And so as they're walking around, they're just casually grabbing the merchandise. They also walked into a Kohl's store and allegedly stole, this is from Fox News, more merchandise, totaling between the two nearly $1,000 in stolen goods. And so this goes right back to what we all have been talking about for a long time, which is the soft on crime policies. And so there in California, you've got these girls that are so used to just being able to steal at will because they know that they're not going to be picked up because of those soft on crime policies. Little did they know that Proposition 36 was passed, which increases punishments for some retail theft and drug possession offenses. It went into effect on Wednesday morning in California. So when these girls were picked up for stealing about $1,000 worth of merchandise and stolen goods, the police caught them, they handcuffed them, and they threw them into the back of a police car. And the cop cam captured this dialogue between these 2 girls.
It's a felony? New laws. Stealing is a felony. And this is Orange County. They don't play. That's why I asked what county is this. That's where I went to jail last year and got on probation for a year for stealing out of Target.
So the audio's not that great, but she's basically saying that this is why you don't steal in Orange County. Seal Beach is in Orange County. This is why you don't steal in Orange County. Because Orange County, she says, don't play. Well, all right, you rocket scientist, then why were you stealing in Orange County if Orange County don't play? And I love the other girl. Stealing's a felony? And I don't know if it is or not in California, whatever. Well, apparently it is. And so now they're looking at having a felony on their record. But the one girl, the one on the right in the video, she's saying, well, this is why I had to spend time in jail last year, is because I got picked up for stealing. Well, then why are you doing it again? And people are loving this video because, how many of us have just felt like we've been banging our heads against a wall because you see the surveillance video, you see these people, and they're just walk in and they're grabbing stuff. They've got a trash bag or they've got, whatever, and they just throw the stuff into the bag and they just, arrogantly walk out. And so I love that these girls got picked up. I love that the dialogue was caught on camera, and they're really upset now that new laws are in place in California that means that they are going to jail. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night. I should say they return after the first of the year. I apologize. I keep saying that. It's muscle memory. But they'll return after the first of the year. You can always follow me on X and also at Facebook, both of those at Dan Mandis Show. Coming up next week, I'll return to my duties hosting on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can check that out at 99.7WTN.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.